The corridor is loud with laughter. Not cruel, just careless. A release valve after 12 hours of death held at arm's length. Someone makes a joke as the nurse passes, her badge swings, her left foot doesn't lift quite high enough. A limp. They don't lower their voices. Why would they? She never looks up, never correct them, never ask for help. Then the rhythm of the hospital breaks. Not alarms, not shouting. Boots, too even, too fast, moving through the noise instead of with it. The nurse stops walking. Down the hall, ER doors slam open. A trauma gurney explodes inside, blood-soaked sheets, sand ground into skin, hands gripping the rails like they're still airborne. Military hands. The room reacts late. She doesn't. One of the men at the gurney's side lifts his head. His eyes scan equipment, exits, angles, then stop on her. The laughter dies, piece by piece. No one knows why, except him, because they thought they were watching a nurse fall behind. They were wrong. She isn't late, she's early. The hospital never truly slept. At night, it only changed its breathing. Monitors pulse softly behind glass. Wheels whispered along polished floors. Somewhere deep in the building, a ventilator sighed in a slow mechanical rhythm that matched the hour. Steady, tired, persistent. The nurse moved down the corridor with a supply cart, her pace uneven. Not slow enough to draw concern, just enough to be seen. Her left leg lagged behind the right by half a beat, a drag most people noticed only after a second glance. Long enough for eyes to flicker downward, short enough for them to look away and decide what it meant. Old injury, bad knee, someone who shouldn't be working nights anymore. Her name badge read Elena Martin, RN, nothing else. At the nurses' station, a group of residents laughed quietly over coffee gone cold. One of them, new, still too energetic for 2 a.m., tilted his head as she passed. "Hey, Elena," he said, not unkind. "You want me to grab that box for you?" She stopped the cart herself, unlocked the brake, and lifted the box down without answering. Her hands didn't shake. Her breathing didn't change. "No," she said. "I've got it." The resident smiled, shrugged, and went back to his conversation. It wasn't a dismissal. It was something softer and worse. Assumption. Elena slid the box onto a counter, then leaned on the cart for exactly 3 seconds. No more, no less. Long enough for the pressure in her leg to ease. Short enough that no one noticed. She had learned the timing. Down the hall, a trauma room door swung open. Voices rose, then settled. Another routine admission, another night that would blur into the next. Charge nurse Caldwell scanned the board, pen tapping against plastic. "Elena," she called, already half turned away, "I'm keeping you off trauma tonight. Take med rounds and supply checks." It wasn't phrased as a question. Elena nodded once, understood. Caldwell didn't look at her. The decision had already been justified internally. Limp, age, risk. Best to keep her where mistakes would be quieter. Elena pushed the cart away, wheels aligned perfectly straight. She didn't argue, she never did. As she moved through the ward, she noticed things others missed. A patient's oxygen saturation trending down by a single point, a call light that hadn't been answered in too long. The way a security guard paused at the far doors, listening to his radio instead of the hallway. She adjusted the drip rate, repositioned a patient without waking them, restocked a crash cart that hadn't been used in weeks, but might be tonight. Her limp worsened when she crouched. She compensated automatically, shifting weight using the wall to rise. The movement was practiced, economical. I learned the hard way. In the break room, 2 nurses whispered. "Do you know what happened to her?" one asked. "Car accident, I think," the other said. "Or surgery, something like that." Still, the first replied, "I don't know how she manages nights like this." Elena washed her hands at the sink behind them. Water ran for the full count. 20 seconds. She dried carefully, folded the paper towel twice before discarding it. She did not correct them. The truth sat heavy in her leg, not as pain but as memory, damage that had been managed, not fixed, something earned, not suffered randomly. At 2:17 a.m., the automatic doors at the far end of the ER slid open. Elena felt it before she saw it. The hospital's rhythm shifted, not louder, sharper. Voices tightened, footsteps synchronized. The air itself seemed to pull inward, as if bracing. She paused mid-step, fingers resting lightly on the cart handle. Then came the sound, wheels, moving fast. Too fast for routine. A gurney burst through the doors, flanked by men who did not look like civilians pretending to be calm. They were already calm. Dust clung to their boots. Dried blood darkened their sleeves. One of them pressed hard against a wound, jaw locked, eyes forward. Another scanned the room with controlled precision, cataloging exits without turning his head. Male, mid-30s, a medic called out. GSW with complications, unstable vitals, possible internal bleeding. Doctors converged, orders flew. The practiced chaos of emergency care took over. Elena moved instinctively to the side, giving space. She was not assigned here. She knew the rules. Then the patient shifted. Despite the pain, despite the blood loss, his eyes opened. Clear, focused, searching. They passed over the doctors, over the lights, over the ceiling tiles rushing past, and stopped on her. For a fraction of a second, nothing else existed. Recognition crossed his face. Not a surprise, certainty. His grip tightened on the gurney rail. He turned his head slightly, just enough. "Elena," he said, quiet, hoarse, certain. She froze. No one else noticed the word. It vanished beneath alarms and instructions. But one of the men beside the gurney did. His posture changed. Subtle. A shift in weight. His gaze snapped to her, sharper now, assessing. Elena met his eyes for half a second. That was all. Then she stepped forward, smooth and unhurried, placing herself exactly where she would be needed if things went wrong. Her limp was more pronounced now. Pain flickered behind her composure. The laughter from earlier felt distant, irrelevant. They still thought they were watching a nurse struggle to keep up. They had no idea what she was actually measuring. And the night was only beginning. The ER absorbed the incoming trauma the way it always did, efficiently, without ceremony. Doors swung, gloves snapped. A nurse called out vitals while another cut fabric away. The rhythm was familiar, almost comforting in its predictability. Elena stood just outside the circle of urgency, chart tablet tucked under her arm, eyes steady. She was not assigned to the case. No one had asked her to be closer. Still, she listened. The captain's breathing was shallow but controlled, the kind of control that came from training rather than comfort. His pulse spiked, then leveled. Pain managed but not eliminated. He didn't look away from the ceiling lights, not once. People who panicked looked for faces. He didn't need them. Elena shifted her weight, easing pressure off her leg. The ache had deepened, sharp now, like a reminder that she had already ignored once tonight. She noted it, compartmentalized it, and let it sit. Around her, details stacked quietly. The security guard at the far end of the hall had stopped pacing. He stood still now, radio pressed closer to his ear. His shoulders were tight. 2 ambulances that should have arrived minutes apart came within seconds of each other, and neither carried civilians. A junior doctor reached for a medication tray, hesitated, then took the wrong vial before correcting himself. Stress was climbing faster than anyone admitted. Elena tapped a note into her tablet, then deleted it. She watched the SEAL team without staring. The way they positioned themselves was wrong for family, wrong for friends, too disciplined, too aware of each other's blind spots. One man stood with his back to the wall, not the patient. Another kept a clear line of sight to the doors at all times. Protection, not concern. A nurse leaned toward Elena. "We're probably going to be slammed," she murmured. "You okay covering the west wing if we overflow?" Elena nodded. "I'll prepare." She moved before being asked. In the west wing, she checked doors first, then equipment, then lines of sight. She repositioned a crash cart closer to an intersection, angled it so it wouldn't block movement but could be reached in 2 steps. She adjusted a privacy curtain so it could be pulled without snagging. None of it drew attention. She paused near a window overlooking the ambulance bay. The glass reflected her back faintly, blue scrubs, hair pulled tight, posture slightly off-center because of the leg. She ignored it and focused beyond. 2 unmarked vehicles idled with engines running. Their drivers stayed inside. No phones, no conversation, not law enforcement. Not yet. Her tablet vibrated. Security alert. Standby, no explanation, no details. Elena exhaled slowly through her nose. She'd seen that phrasing before. Not here. Not in this life. She walked back toward the ER, passing a group of residents clustered around a workstation. One of them laughed too loudly. A release more than humor. "False alarm, probably," someone said. "They always overreact when the military's involved." Elena didn't stop. She didn't correct them. At the trauma room entrance, a senior surgeon raised his voice. "We need imaging now. Move." The SEAL team parted instantly, clearing space with minimal motion. One of them caught Elena's eye again, same man as before. His expression was unreadable, but his attention stayed on her longer than necessary. She stepped inside, still unassigned, and began preparing the imaging bay without being told. Adjusted the table height, checked restraints, ensured nothing metallic remained. The surgeon glanced at her. "You're not in this case." "I know," she said evenly. "CT will be ready." He hesitated, then nodded. Time mattered more than hierarchy. As the gurney rolled past, the captain turned his head slightly again. This time he said nothing. He didn't need to. The acknowledgement was already there. The overhead lights flickered once. Just once. Most people didn't notice. Elena did. She looked up, then down the hall. The security guard had moved closer now. Another guard joined him. Their hands hovered near their belts without touching. The hospital soundscape shifted, not louder, not quieter, tighter. Conversations shortened, footsteps aligned. Elena's tablet vibrated again. Lockdown protocol. Prepare not active. Not yet. She closed her eyes for half a second, not in fear, in calculation. If the threat came from outside, the ER would be the choke point. If it came from inside, the West Wing was exposed. Either way, patients would be trapped in beds, unable to move. She began quietly redirecting flow. "Can you switch beds 3 and 4? She asked another nurse. "We'll need clearance." "Why?" "Just in case." The nurse shrugged and complied. Elena adjusted her stance as pain flared again, sharper now. Her leg trembled once before she locked it down. She welcomed the sensation. Pain meant she was still in control of it. Across the room, one of the SEALs murmured into his sleeve. Elena didn't hear the words, but she recognized the cadence. Short, precise, no wasted syllables. The captain was wheeled toward imaging, vitals unstable but holding. As he passed Elena, his eyes met hers again. This time, there was something else there. Trust. He believed she would know what to do next, even if no one else did. Elena watched him disappear down the corridor. Then she turned back to the ward, already adjusting her mental map. The warning signs were no longer subtle. Whatever was coming had not chosen the hospital by accident, and when it arrived, there would be no room for hesitation. Not from her. The call came through imaging first. Not an alarm. A voice. Low, controlled, stripped of urgency because urgency wasted time. CT complete. He's bleeding internally. We need surgery now. The words traveled fast, faster than the gurney. The surgical team mobilized, footsteps converging toward the OR wing. Overhead lights brightened in stages, illuminating corridors that had been dim minutes earlier. The hospital was reshaping itself around a single priority. Elena moved with it, one step behind the rush, never in the way, never lost. As the gurney returned from imaging, the captain's color had faded. His jaw clenched harder now, breath more shallow. One of his men walked at his side, hand hovering just above the rail, as if proximity alone could stabilize him. "Vitals?" a resident asked. "Dropping," a nurse replied. "BP unstable." The surgeon swore under his breath. They angled toward or two. Elena adjusted her pace to match, pain flaring sharply as she accelerated. Her limp became more visible now, no longer something she could disguise. She ignored the looks. Pain was information. She used it to measure how long she could stay upright before it began to cost more than it gave. At the ore doors, security had already arrived. 2 guards stood there, hands clasped in front of them, posture formal but uncertain. They weren't trained for this kind of patient. They were trained for visitors who got loud. The SEAL team stopped short of the doors. "We'll stay here," one of them said to no one in particular. "No," the surgeon replied automatically. "Only staff past this point." The air tightened. Elena felt it before voices rose. That familiar narrowing of options when authority collided with protocol. The captain lifted his head slightly. It cost him. His face tightened, but his voice remained steady. "They stay," he said. The surgeon turned. "Sir, you're going into surgery. This isn't negotiable." The captain's gaze shifted to Elena, not asking, checking. She stepped forward, just enough to be seen. "They'll wait outside the sterile zone," she said. Calm, neutral, they won't interfere. The surgeon frowned. "And you are?" "Charge support tonight," Elena replied. Not a lie, not the full truth. A beat passed. Then another. "Fine," the surgeon said, "but they don't cross that line." The SEALs nodded once. Agreement, not gratitude. As the gurney rolled through the doors, one of them caught Elena's sleeve gently, not a grab, a pause. "Ma'am," he said quietly. Respectful, intentional. The word landed heavier than it should have. She met his eyes. "He'll need blood ready before the incision, type O negative." He hesitated. "They already ordered." "Trust me." He released her sleeve and stepped back. A moment later he was on his radio. Inside the OR prep area the pace accelerated. Gloves snapped, instruments clinked. The anesthesiologist called out numbers that slid in the wrong direction. Elena positioned herself near the monitors, not central, not peripheral, where she could see everything without being in command. The captain's breathing faltered. "Pressure's dropping," someone said. "Push fluids. They're not holding." Elena leaned in slightly. "There's another bleed," she said. "Retroperitoneal. It won't show clean on CT." The surgeon snapped his head toward her. "What?" "Pelvic region," she continued. "Secondary trauma. You'll see it when you open it." Silence followed. Brief, sharp. The surgeon studied her face, searching for arrogance. Finding none. "We'll find out," he said. As anesthesia took hold, the captain's eyes fluttered. Before they closed, he turned his head one last time. He raised his hand. Not in salute, not yet. Just enough to signal acknowledgement. Elena nodded once in return. Then he was gone. Outside the OR, the SEAL team stood in a loose formation that pretended to be casual. One of them paced 3 steps, stopped, then repeated. Another stared at the floor, jaw working. Elena approached them slowly, favoring her leg now. She felt the tremor return and forced it down. "He's alive," she said. "That's all that matters right now." They didn't thank her. They didn't ask questions. They believed her. As she turned away, her tablet vibrated again. Lockdown status, imminent this time, there were no qualifiers. Elena looked down the corridor, measuring distance, exits, angles. The hospital had crossed a threshold, and soon everyone would feel it. The OR doors closed with a final, sealed sound that carried farther than it should have. Elena stood for a moment after they shut, listening, not to the room, but to what was missing. The captain's steady presence was gone. The gravity he carried with him had shifted, spreading outward, settling uneasily across the floor. Outside the OR, the SEAL team remained where they were. No one sat, no one learned. They occupied space the way trained men did when waiting was the only option left to them. A resident cleared his throat. "We'll update you as soon as we can." One of the SEALs nodded. "We'll be here." It wasn't a request, it wasn't defiance, it was a statement of fact. Elena turned away before the tension could thicken. Her leg protested sharply now, the pain no longer distant or manageable. She adjusted her stride, shortened it, and compensated. The limp became obvious again. She headed back toward the ER. The lockdown warning had not yet been announced overhead, but the signs were there. Security doors slid closed at the far end of the corridor. Access points blinked from green to amber. The hospital was tightening its perimeter without telling anyone why. In Trauma Bay 3, a junior doctor hovered over a patient who was deteriorating faster than expected. A monitor chirped irregularly, the sound small but insistent. "What's going on?" Elena asked, stepping inside. "BP's unstable," the doctor said. "We're pushing meds, but he's not responding." Elena looked once at the patient, once at the 4-line. She reached out and stopped the pump. "Hey," the doctor began. "Check the line," she said. He frowned, irritated, then followed her gaze. The 4 had infiltrated. Medication was pooling uselessly beneath the skin. The doctor flushed, quickly correcting it. Okay, thank you." Elena stepped back. No comment, no satisfaction. At the nurse's station, Charge Nurse Caldwell watched the room with a tight expression. "Administration wants to know why security is escalating," Caldwell said quietly as Elena passed. "Do you know something I don't?" Elena paused. Choose her words carefully. "I know we should keep non-essential staff away from the ER for now," she said, "and we should prepare extra blood units." Caldwell studied her. "That's a lot of confidence for someone on mid-rounds." Elena met her gaze. Calm, even. "It's precaution," she said. "Nothing more." A beat passed. "Fine," Caldwell said. "I'll make the call." Down the hall, voices rose near the ambulance bay. Not shouting, confusion. Someone arguing about access credentials. A security guard's voice tightened, edged with authority he wasn't used to using. Elena moved toward the sound. At the doors, 2 men in plain clothes stood facing security. Athletic builds, controlled posture. They weren't raising their voices, but they weren't backing away either. "We need entry," one of them said. "Now." "That's not possible," the guard replied. "We're under restricted access." Elena stepped between them without hesitation. "What's the nature of your request?" she asked. The men looked at her, eyes flicking briefly to her badge, then to her leg. "Federal," one said. "Time sensitive." Elena nodded once. "Then you'll wait. If you push, you'll slow yourselves down." The man's jaw tightened. "And who are you to decide that?" She held his gaze, unblinking. "Someone who knows this building better than you do." Silence followed, heavy, charged. Then one of the men glanced past her, toward the OR wing, toward the SEALs standing in quiet formation. Recognition flickered. "Understood," he said finally. "We'll wait." They stepped back. The security guard exhaled shakily. "Thank you," he muttered. Elena didn't respond. She was already moving. Her leg buckled slightly as she turned. Pain shot upward, sharp enough to steal half a breath. She caught herself on the wall, fingers digging into the edge of a handrail. No one noticed. She straightened, forced the limp back into something manageable, and continued down the corridor. Behind her, conversations resumed, but softer now, more cautious. People sensed the shift even if they couldn't name it. Elena reached the far intersection and stopped, resting her hand briefly against the wall. This was the moment, the first interruption, the point where routine ended and consequence began. She pushed off the wall and walked on. The night was no longer waiting. The hospital adjusted the way living things did when the weather turned. not all at once, in small instinctive corrections. Elena felt it as she moved. Conversations shortened, laughter disappeared entirely. Doors that usually stayed open were pulled halfway shut. Staff began to cluster closer to stations instead of wandering the halls. No announcement had been made. None was needed. She stopped at the central desk and glanced at the board. Patient names blurred into categories: risk, mobility, dependency. She rearranged assignments quietly, shifting 2 nurses from low acuity rooms to observation bays, rerouting a respiratory therapist closer to trauma without saying why. "Did you change the board?" a nurse asked. "Yes," Elena said. The nurse hesitated. "Charge didn't." "I know." Another pause. Then the nurse nodded and followed the new layout. It was happening again. The same subtle transfer of gravity she had felt before in other places, other buildings. The authority didn't announce itself. It accumulated. Elena's leg throbbed now, heat radiating through muscle and bone. She shortened her stride further, minimizing rotation. Every step was a calculation. She welcomed the focus. It kept her from thinking about how long she had already been pushing. A crash echoed from down the hall. Not metal, not equipment. A body hitting a door. Security voices rose, quick, sharp. Elena moved toward the sound, her pace increasing despite the pain. At the intersection near the west wing, 2 orderlies struggled with the patient. Male, large, agitated, 4-line torn loose. Blood smeared his gown. Panic widened his eyes. "I need to leave," he shouted. "You can't keep me here." "Sir, please," one orderly said, backing up. Elena stepped in. She didn't raise her voice. "Sir," she said, "look at me." The man's attention snapped to her without him realizing why. Her tone cut through the noise, not loud, not commanding. Precise. "You're bleeding," she continued. "If you move, it gets worse. If you stay still, we fix it." His chest heaved. His gaze flicked to her leg, then back to her face. "You're hurt," he said, accusatory, defensive. "Yes," Elena replied, "and I'm still standing." She placed her hand lightly on his forearm, not restraining, not comforting, grounding. "Breathe," she said. "Now." He did. The orderlies froze, unsure whether to intervene. Elena didn't look at them. "Step back," she said quietly. They obeyed. She guided the patient back to the bed with minimal force, redirecting momentum instead of fighting it. Once he was seated, she secured the 4 with steady hands, her own leg trembling under the strain. Only when he was stable did she step away. "Thank you," one orderly whispered. Elena nodded once and moved on. Near the OR wing, the SEAL team had shifted positions. They stood farther apart now, covering more angles. One of them watched Elena approach, eyes narrowing slightly, not in suspicion but recognition. She stopped a few feet away. "Surgery's ongoing," she said. "Complications but manageable." "Understood," he replied. "Any movement outside?" "Not yet," Elena said, "but it's coming." He studied her for a moment. "You seem sure." "I am." A pause. "If things go bad," he said, lowering his voice, "we won't bring it into the hospital." Elena met his gaze. "You won't have to." The words surprised him. He didn't question them. As she turned away, pain flared sharply enough that her vision blurred for a split second. She slowed, breathing through it, refusing the wall this time. The cost was rising. She felt it in the weakness creeping up her thigh. At the nurse's station, Charge Nurse Caldwell watched her approach. "You've been everywhere," Caldwell said, "and somehow nothing's fallen apart." Elena rested her hands lightly on the counter. "It's holding," she said. "For now." Caldwell lowered her voice. "What aren't you telling me?" Elena considered. "Choose honesty without detail. That this isn't about us," she said, "and that if it spills over, we need to be ready." Caldwell searched her face, then nodded slowly. "All right, I'm trusting you." It wasn't an appointment, it was an acknowledgement. Elena straightened, suppressing a wince as her leg protested again. She felt the weight of the shift settle fully now, not just in her, but in the room itself. People began to look at her before acting, waiting for her nod. Her absence of objection. She never gave orders, she didn't need to. The hospital had already adjusted around her, and outside, unseen and unannounced, whatever was coming drew closer. The overhead announcement came without drama, no sirens, no urgency layered into the voice. "Attention all staff. The hospital is now under controlled lockdown. Please remain at your assigned stations until further notice." That was all. The effect was immediate. Doors sealed with soft mechanical clicks. Elevators froze between floors, then redirected. Visitors looked up from phones, confused, unsettled by the absence of explanation. Elena felt the lockdown like a pressure change. She stood at the central intersection, eyes moving, not fast, not frantic, counting doors, counting people, counting seconds. Security took positions that suggested training manuals rather than experience. Hands too close to radios, feet too close together. They would follow instructions well. They would improvise poorly. She adjusted for that. Elena. Charged Nurse Caldwell's voice carried just enough tension to matter. "They're saying possible external threats," Caldwell said. "Administration wants everyone in place." Elena nodded. "We should clear the west corridor. Too many blind corners." Caldwell hesitated. "That's a patient overflow." "I know." Another beat. "Do it," Caldwell said. Elena moved immediately. She rerouted 2 gurneys with practiced efficiency, guiding nurses without explanation. Patients complained softly, then stopped when they saw her face, calm, unhurried, unafraid. Her leg burned now, pain sharp enough to steal rhythm from her breath. She shortened her movements, conserving energy, leaning into efficiency rather than speed. At the far end of the ER, voices spiked. A man shouted, angry, panicked, unfamiliar with authority, a visitor who hadn't been cleared out in time. "You can't keep me here," he said. "My wife needs air, she needs to leave." Security blocked him, uncertain. Elena stepped in again, placing herself between them. "She needs oxygen," Elena said, eyes on the patient behind him, not the parking lot. The man turned, ready to argue, then stopped. Something in her posture held him. Not a threat, certainty. "We'll bring it to her," Elena continued, "right now." She gestured once. A nurse moved instantly. The man sagged, fear draining into relief. "Okay," he said. "Okay." Elena guided him aside, then turned away without waiting for thanks. Down the hall, the SEAL team had gone still, not waiting, listening. One of them lifted a hand slightly, 2 fingers. Another shifted position, adjusting angle to the main entrance. Elena caught it out of the corner of her eye. She approached, lowering her voice. "You're hearing something." "Yes, ma'am," the same SEAL replied. "Not here yet." "Where?" she asked. "Loading bay," he said. "Or they want us to think that." Elena nodded once. "They won't come through the ER." "How do you know?" "Too many witnesses," she said. "Too much chaos." A pause. "They'll try the service corridors," she continued. "They always do." The SEAL's jaw tightened. "Those lead straight past the ICU." "I know." Her leg faltered as she turned away, pain lancing hard enough to force her to stop. She pressed her palm briefly against the wall, no longer hiding it now. The cost was unavoidable. She breathed through it, controlled, silent. At the ICU access point, security had sealed the doors, but not reinforced them. Elena corrected that, adding a second lock manually, checking hinges, positioning equipment that could be moved quickly if needed. A junior nurse watched her. "Should we be doing this?" "Yes," Elena said. "Now." The nurse nodded and helped without further questions. Somewhere deep in the building, a metallic clang echoed, distant, muffled. Not equipment. Elena closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, then opened them. This was no longer a precaution. It was contact. Her tablet vibrated. Security breach, internal route unknown. Elena exhaled slowly. She looked down the corridor toward the ore wing, where the captain lay open on a table, his life balanced on precision and time. Then she looked at her leg, trembling now, barely holding. The choice wasn't dramatic. It never was. She straightened, squared her shoulders, and moved toward the breach. The hospital held its breath, and Elena Martin walked into the narrowing dark. The service corridor smelled different, less antiseptic, more metal, old air that had never fully learned how to circulate. Elena moved carefully now, each step deliberate. The pain in her leg had crossed from sharp into something deeper, hot, unstable, muscle compensating for damage it was never meant to carry this long. She welcomed the clarity that came with it. 2 security guards stood at the junction ahead, backs rigid, eyes fixed on a closed door marked authorized personnel only. One of them turned when he heard her approach. "Ma'am, you shouldn't be here," he said. "We've got—" "I know," Elena replied. "How long since you last heard from Central?" The guard hesitated. 2 minutes. "That's too long," she said. "Give me the keycard. I can't—" She met his eyes, not hard, not soft, certain. He handed it over. Elena slid the card through the reader. The light flicked green. She didn't open the door immediately. She listened, counted. The building spoke in small ways if you let it. A distant scuff, a breath that didn't belong to the ventilation system. She raised her hand. The guards froze. "Stay here," she said. "If that door opens again, lock it behind me." The taller guard swallowed. "You can't go alone." "I won't be," Elena said. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The corridor beyond was narrow, lined with utility carts and shadow. Halfway down, a man crouched near a maintenance panel, his back turned, movements fast and sloppy. Not military, not disciplined, desperate. Elena stopped well short of him. "Don't move," she said. The man spun, eyes wide, a compact handgun shaking in his grip. He looked young, too young for what he thought he was doing. "Stay back," he said. "I don't want to hurt anyone." "I believe you," Elena replied, "but you will if you keep going." He laughed once, sharp and brittle. "You don't know what's at stake." "I know enough," she said. "You're not getting past this corridor." He glanced past her, toward the ICU signage behind her, toward the ore wing beyond that. "I have to," he said. "They're making me." Elena shifted her stance slightly. Pain flared hard enough to blur her vision for a moment. She ignored it. "You don't," she said. "You can put the weapon down and walk back the way you came." He noticed the limp then. His eyes dropped to her leg. "You're hurt," he said. "You think you can stop me like that?" "Yes," Elena said. Not because she was stronger, because she was calmer. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, outside the hospital now. Too late to matter here. The man's grip tightened. Fear made him clumsy. Elena moved. Not fast, not aggressive. She stepped into his space at an angle, redirecting the line of fire away from herself, away from the doors behind her. Her hand came up, striking his wrist once. Precise, economical. The gun clattered to the floor. He stumbled back, shocked more than hurt. She didn't pursue it. She didn't need to. "Sit down," she said. "Now." He did. Behind her, boots pounded. The SEAL team flooded the corridor, weapons raised but steady, controlled. They secured the man in seconds, movements clean and rehearsed. One of them looked at Elena's leg, now visibly shaking. "You're injured," he said. "Yes," Elena replied. "We can take it from here." She nodded. Relief washed through her. Not emotional, physical. The adrenaline drained too fast. Her leg gave out. She caught herself on the wall, breath hitching despite her control. The pain was no longer manageable. It was damage now. Real, immediate, undeniable. A medic rushed forward. "You need to sit. I need to get back to the OR, Elena said. He hesitated. "Ma'am." "The captain," she said. "He's still open." The medic looked to the SEAL team. One of them nodded once. "We'll support her," he said. They moved with her, not carrying, not rushing, matching her pace as she limped back through the corridor. Every step was a negotiation with pain. At the OR doors, a surgeon met them, eyes tight with stress. "We're losing him," the surgeon said. "Pressure won't stabilize." Elena leaned heavily against the wall, breath shallow now. "Clamp the secondary bleed," she said. "Lower quadrant. You'll find it." The surgeon stared at her. "We already—" "Trust me," she said again, softer now, weaker, still certain, a long beat. Then the surgeon turned and disappeared back into the OR. Elena slid down the wall, finally sitting, the cost fully paid. Her leg trembled uncontrollably now, pain radiating upward in waves. One of the SEALs knelt in front of her. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. "Yes," Elena replied. "I did." Inside the OR, the surgeon's voice rose, orders sharpened, movements accelerated, minutes passed. Then a different tone emerged, controlled, relieved. The bleeding stopped. Elena closed her eyes, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. She had stayed, she had paid for it. And because of that, the captain would live. Elena woke to voices layered over one another, not shouting, focused, urgent in the way professionals sounded when the margin was thin but not gone. She opened her eyes to the ceiling lights of the OR corridor, their edges slightly blurred. Her leg pulsed with deep, punishing heat. Someone had wrapped it tightly, compression done correctly, not hurried. "She's awake," a nurse said softly. "I'm fine," Elena replied, before anyone asked. It cost her to say it. She accepted the cost. Inside or two, the rhythm had changed. The frantic edge was gone, replaced by something steadier. Decisive movements, voices no longer overlapping. "Elena." The surgeon stood just inside the doorway, mask pulled down around his neck, sweat darkening his collar. "You were right," he said. "Secondary bleeding. We clamped it in time." She nodded once. "How long?" "Another 20 minutes," he replied. "Maybe less." She closed her eyes briefly, letting that settle. Alive, stable, not safe yet, but past the point of collapse. Outside the OR, the corridor filled slowly, not with spectators, but with necessity. Administrators who didn't know where to stand. Security supervisors pretending to coordinate. Nurses waiting for orders that didn't need to be spoken. The SEAL team remained just beyond the doors. One of them had blood on his sleeve that wasn't his. Another sat against the wall, head tipped back, eyes closed, but alert even in rest. Elena pushed herself upright. Pain flared immediately, sharp and punishing. She hissed once through her teeth, then stilled. A nurse rushed forward. "You shouldn't move." "I know," Elena said. "Help me stand." The nurse hesitated, then did. Elena leaned heavily now, no longer hiding it. The limp was pronounced. The strength that had carried her this far was thinning. Still she stood. Down the hall, the hospital shook, not physically, but socially. News traveled faster than confirmation. The staff whispered. Someone cried quietly near the vending machines, the delayed release of fear. Security radio chatter rose, then settled. Threat neutralized, a voice crackled faintly. No further movement. Elena listened without reacting. She had already moved past that moment. A hospital administrator approached. Face pale, suit rumpled. "Ms. Martin," he began, "will need a report, and—" "Later," she said, not unkindly, final. He stopped speaking. The SEAL captain was wheeled out just before dawn. Not conscious, not yet, but alive. His color had returned enough to be noticeable. Tubes and lines framed him, but the monitors told a different story now, numbers climbing back towards stability. As the gurney passed, the corridor fell silent. Doctors, nurses, security, all of them watched without knowing why it felt important to do so. The SEAL team straightened instinctively. One of them glanced at Elena. "He made it," he said. "Yes," she replied. The gurney stopped. Slowly, carefully, the captain lifted his head. His movements were weak but deliberate. Pain showed on his face, but it didn't own him. His eyes found Elena immediately. She tried to step back. Her leg refused. He struggled upright just enough to sit, ignoring hands reaching to steady him. "Captain," a nurse began. He raised a hand. Then, in the middle of the hospital corridor, under fluorescent lights, surrounded by civilians who didn't understand the language of the gesture, he saluted, not casually, not symbolically, formally, cleanly, with everything he had left. The SEALs snapped to attention without being told. The sound of their boots aligning echoed louder than any alarm had all night. Elena didn't return the salute. She couldn't. She only inclined her head slightly, eyes steady, expression unchanged. That was enough. The captain let himself be lowered back onto the gurney. As they rolled him away, the corridor remained frozen in the wake of something unspoken but undeniable. No one asked questions. They didn't need to. Elena's strength finally gave out. She sat heavily on the nearest bench, breath shallow, legs shaking uncontrollably now. The cost had come due, and she had paid it in full. The OR doors closed behind the gurney with a soft, final click. Elena remained in the corridor, seated on the edge of a low bench. The pain in her leg had become a steady ache, deep into bone and muscle, a reminder of the night's relentless cost. Her hands rested lightly on her knees, her breathing steady. She had earned every ounce of exhaustion, but she did not allow herself to look relieved. Relief was quiet. Relief was survival. That was all. The corridor was empty now, or close to it. The hum of the ventilation system and the distant beep of monitors created the illusion of calm. But Elena knew the calm was only temporary. Every sound was a message, every shift of shadow a question waiting to be answered. Then she heard the faint shuffle of boots. Different boots. Precise, measured. The captain. The gurney had been wheeled to recovery, but he was not content to stay lying. Painfully, methodically, he lifted himself from the stretcher. His injuries were still raw, his body weak, but his posture demanded attention. The SEAL team flanked him instinctively, forming a silent protective circle, but it wasn't needed. Elena was already present. She had been. He paused, eyes scanning the corridor, then fixed on her. Without hesitation, he brought his hand to his brow. A salute. It was deliberate, formal, heavy with recognition, discipline, and respect that no words could ever convey. The SEALs mirrored the motion in perfect sync. Others nearby, a security guard, a nurse, shifted awkwardly, uncertain of protocol, unsure if they should follow. Elena did not salute back. She could not. Her strength had limits, her pain was real, and she had no need to display authority. Instead, she inclined her head slightly, ever so subtly. A quiet acknowledgement. That was enough. The captain's hand dropped, and he allowed himself to be eased back onto the gurney. The movement was careful, controlled, but the weight of the gesture had already landed. The SEALs formed up, signaling readiness to move him. The corridor, once chaotic, now felt like a quiet stage set for the aftermath. Elena rose carefully from the bench, testing her leg. Each step reminded her of the cost she had paid. She limped slightly as she walked toward the nearest exit from the OR corridor. No one followed. No one congratulated me. No one offered thanks. The night had demanded that she act, and she had. The acknowledgement she received was private, subtle, earned, and enough. As she moved down the corridor, the hum of monitors and the faint smell of antiseptic accompanied her. The hospital was slowly returning to normal, though nothing about the night would be forgotten. She paused near the nurse's station. A resident looked up, hesitant. "Miss Martin, are you okay?" "I am," she said. It was not a reassurance. It was a statement. And with that, she continued past them, back toward the ward she had come from, back into the quiet work of the night. No applause. No spotlight. Just the slow, measured rhythm of responsibility, the subtle weight of recognition, and the quiet knowledge that the life she had saved had survived because she had chosen to stay. The night shifted. The chaos had ended. But Elena's presence lingered in every corner, a still point in a hospital that had nearly collapsed under the pressure of events it could barely understand. She walked on, alone, and the world adjusted around her. The hospital moved slowly into the morning. Shifts changed. Footsteps grew heavier with the weight of fatigue. The fluorescent lights, which had seemed sharper all night, softened into the dull hum of routine. But the night's events had left marks, in equipment, in bloodstains cleaned too late, in exhausted staff who didn't yet speak about what had happened. Elena walked the corridors alone, her limp more pronounced now, each step a reminder of the cost she had already paid. She checked monitors, adjusted beds, and made rounds as though nothing had happened, though everything had. The weight of responsibility pressed lightly but insistently against her shoulders. She passed the trauma bay where the SEAL captain had been stabilized. The gurney was empty now. The patient moved to a private room for recovery. She paused just outside the door, listening to the soft rhythm of his ventilator. Even behind the closed doors, she felt the measure of his survival. A nurse approached cautiously. "Everything's quiet now," she said. Elena nodded once. "For now," she replied. Her voice was calm, measured, but carried the tension of someone who had seen what could happen when preparation failed. She checked the West Wing, noting that beds were returned to normal positions and equipment restocked. Staff moved quietly, aware of her presence but careful not to seek approval. The authority she carried last night had settled into the walls. No announcement, no acknowledgement needed. The SEAL team had left quietly, blending back into the world outside the hospital. They had departed with the same discipline they had maintained all night, efficient, silent, and without fanfare. Their respect lingered, though no one else would have noticed it. Elena's leg throbbed. Pain had become constant now, gnawing at her focus, but she ignored it. There was work to be done, procedures to check, patients to monitor. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, only the quiet rhythm of responsibility. Charge Nurse Caldwell passed by, pausing just long enough to meet Elena's eyes. No words were spoken. A single nod, a subtle acknowledgement that spoke volumes. It was enough. Elena continued her rounds, checking each room, adjusting monitors, ensuring that patients were stable. Her steps were slow but deliberate, her presence grounding the staff without a single command. Outside, the morning light began to seep into the hospital windows, painting the walls in muted gold. The night's chaos had passed, the storm was over, and in the quiet aftermath, Elena carried herself with the same restraint she had all night. No spotlight, no recognition, only the quiet weight of duty fulfilled. The hospital had survived, the captain had survived, and she had done what was required, silently, efficiently, and without expectation. Pain and exhaustion were hers to carry, responsibility and competence were hers to wield, and she would continue unnoticed, steadfast, ready for whatever came next. The hospital settled into an uneasy calm. Morning had arrived, but the night's events lingered in the air. The faint scent of antiseptic mixed with lingering adrenaline, the low hum of machines now steady, the soft shuffle of feet on linoleum floors that had once echoed panic. Elena moved slowly through the ward, her legs still throbbing, each step a reminder of the cost she had borne. She adjusted pillows, checked 4 lines, and ensured monitors were within range. No one spoke directly to her. They didn't need to. Her authority was already established, not through words, not through titles, but through presence. In room 304, the SEAL captain rested. His chest rose and fell evenly, a quiet testament to the night's struggle. Elena lingered at the doorway, scanning his vitals from the monitor, ensuring everything remained stable. She didn't enter. She didn't touch. Her role was to observe, to oversee, and to remain ready. Charge Nurse Caldwell approached silently, a cup of coffee in hand. She placed it gently on the counter, then nodded toward Elena. No words were exchanged, just acknowledgement enough. Elena nodded in return, her eyes soft but focused. She turned her attention back to the ward, walking down the corridor, noting the smallest details: a bed misaligned, a monitor with fading numbers, a restless patient now quiet. Every adjustment she made was careful, deliberate, invisible to those who didn't know where to look. Her limp was now undeniable. She didn't hide it. She didn't need to. Pain had become part of her rhythm, a quiet companion to her relentless focus. Every step was measured, a negotiation with her body. Yet she moved with purpose and precision. In the corner of the nurses' station, a junior nurse glanced at her. "Ms. Martin, we all saw what happened last night." Elena paused, meeting her gaze evenly. "I was doing my job," she said simply. No pride, no explanation, just the calm certainty of someone who had made difficult choices and carried their weight. The young nurse nodded, understanding more than she could say. Some lessons didn't need words. Elena continued her rounds, moving past rooms where patients slept. Machines beeped rhythmically, and life, fragile but resilient, persisted. The hospital was quiet now, orderly and secure, not because of alarms or authority, but because of the calm competence that had held it together when chaos had threatened to break it. She stopped by the window overlooking the ambulance bay. Early sunlight reflected off the pavement, highlighting faint traces of the night's activity. The unmarked vehicles were gone. The distant hum of traffic began to assert itself. The world outside had returned to its normal rhythm. Elena took a deep breath, steadying herself. She could feel the lingering ache of every step, every choice, every moment where restraint had won over instinct. She would carry it with her silently, always. She turned back toward the ward. There was work to do, patients to check, equipment to monitor, lives to stabilize. No one noticed, no one celebrated, no one applauded. And that was exactly how it was meant to be, because quiet strength did not need recognition. It did not seek reward. It only existed. And Elena Martin was proof. The hospital thrummed softly around her, alive, safe, unbroken. She moved through it like a shadow of competence, a calm center in a world that had almost lost its balance. Her leg ached, her body screamed, her mind never wavered. And in that quiet, heavy, earned moment, the world continued, held steady by someone who had never sought the spotlight, but had carried the weight of authority all along.